A man was detained in the middle of a church service he was attending with his wife and children. Wilson Rogelio Velasquez Cruz was arrested by ICE outside of Iglesia Fuente de Vida in Tucker, Georgia, while his family remained inside. During the service, he ignored a phone call, but his GPS ankle monitor suddenly went off, prompting him to step outside. Waiting for him were ICE officers who immediately took him into custody. He was then transferred to Stewart Detention Center pending deportation. Velasquez Cruz and his wife, Calandres, fled violence in Honduras and sought asylum at the U.S. border 2 years ago. At that time, he was issued an ankle monitor. ICE and Customs and Border Protection officials stated that individuals with monitors have them for a reason, but they declined to provide specifics, saying each case is different. Now, Calandres insists her husband has never been in trouble and describes him as a man of faith. He held a 5-year work permit and worked at a tire shop, serving as a sole provider for his wife and their 3 children. Now, with his sudden arrest and expected deportation, his wife is left struggling. Since he was the only one with a work authorization, she cannot legally work to support her family. Now, speaking to her husband on Monday, she learned that he will not be able to appeal his case to a judge. Instead, he is being transferred to another detention facility before his deportation. Now she fears for her own future, saying she is uncertain if her and her 3 children will be deported as well. This arrest is one of many under a new Trump-era policy that allows ICE to detain people at sensitive locations like schools and churches. Calvin Robinson, a priest from England, has been defrocked after mimicking a Nazi salute during his speech at the National Pro-Life Summit in Washington, D.C. in January. At the end of his address, Robinson said, "My heart goes out to you," then performed the salute, which was met with laughter from the crowd. Robinson, known for his outspoken conservative views, has been an advocate for making America pro-life again. The Anglican Catholic Church responded by removing Robinson from the priesthood, condemning the act in a statement saying, quote, "The Holocaust was an episode of unspeakable horror enacted by a regime of evil. We condemn Nazi ideology and anti-Semitism in all of its forms. We believe that those who mimic the Nazi salute even as a joke or an attempt to troll their opponents trivialize the horror of the Holocaust and diminish the sacrifice of those who fought against its perpetrators. Such actions are harmful, divisive, and contrary to the tenets of Christian charity," end quote. The church also revealed that Robinson had previously been warned that online trolling and similar actions were incompatible with the priesthood. In response, Robinson claimed that the salute was a joke meant to mock hysteric liberals and stated, "I am not a Nazi." Now, this incident isn't the first controversy for Robinson. He has faced backlash for defending colonialism, opposing reparations for slavery, and calling the England football team's decision to take a knee in a protest against racism disgusting. Robinson has now been removed from active ministry and stripped of his priesthood. Good riddance. The United States is floating a plan to send immigrants to its torture facility in Guantanamo Bay. President Trump recently suggested using Guantanamo Bay to detain up to 30,000 immigrants. Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, said that immigrants would be flown directly to Guantanamo. The Homeland Security Secretary added that ICE would run the facility and Congress would fund the operation. Guantanamo Bay, located at the U.S. Naval Base in Cuba, has been a center of controversy since it was opened by George Bush in January 2002. Bush originally designed this torture facility to house suspected terrorists after 9/11, but nearly 800 men and boys, mostly Muslim, have been held there, many without charges or trials. Only 15 detainees remain, some of whom have never been charged with a crime. The conditions at Guantanamo Bay are horrific. Detainees have been subjected to being treated like animals, such as being strapped in dog collars and forced to perform tricks, sexual assault, humiliation, forced grooming, shackling and stress, positions, exposure to extreme temperatures, sensory and sleep deprivation and threats of death, confinement in small boxes, and more. Many of the detainees were wrongfully detained, often picked up by other groups for bounties. Some people were detained at Guantanamo Bay for decades with no trial or release. And now Trump's plan could send 30,000 immigrants to this torture camp. Multiple states have reached a $7.4 billion tentative agreement with the scumbag Sackler family over OxyContin's role in the opioid crisis. This settlement is only a fraction of the $35 billion Purdue Pharma made from OxyContin sales. For over a decade, the opioid crisis has caused tens of thousands of deaths per year, devastating working-class communities that trusted their doctors for pain management, only to be left with crippling addiction instead. The previous settlement was rejected by the Supreme Court in June of 2023, as it would have granted the Sacklers immunity from future opioid lawsuits. In a 5-4 decision, the court ruled that a bankruptcy court could not shield the Sacklers from liability. Here are the key terms of the new settlement. So, no immunity from future lawsuits for the Sackler family. It also requires bankruptcy court approval and agreement from the other plaintiffs, and it has a settlement plan of $1.5 billion in the first year, $500 million a year for the next 2 years, and then the remaining balance will be paid over 15 years. The Sacklers will lose control of Purdue Pharma, and then there will be $800 million of the settlement will be set aside for the Sacklers to defend defend themselves against future opioid crisis. Crazy. Purdue Pharma and the Sacklers have a history of deception, and to understand it, I'm going to take you through some of this history. So, Purdue Pharma launched OxyContin in 1996 and falsely marketed it as a safe, low-abuse opioid. In 2007, Purdue pleaded guilty to misbranding OxyContin. Over the years, the Sackler family withdrew $11 billion from Purdue, 40% of which went to corporate taxes. In 2019, Purdue Pharma filed for bankruptcy due to mounting opioid lawsuits. In 2020, there was a settlement, and the Sacklers paid over $8 billion to the federal government. The Sackler family owned Purdue Pharma, aggressively marketed OxyContin as well, despite knowing its highly addictive nature. Purdue Pharma misled doctors and patients about the risk, fueling an epidemic that has caused hundreds of thousands of lives. Internal documents show that the Sacklers were well aware of the drug's addictive potential, but continued to push sales to maximize profits. In a just society, at best, the Sacklers and their entire damn bloodline, babies and all, would be rotten in a jail cell, and at the worst, the top-ranking members of the family would be shot in front of a live studio audience. But this settlement is a step towards justice, but it serves as yet another reminder that in America, if you're rich enough and harm working-class people, you can buy your way out of accountability. The Sacklers knowingly profited off of suffering and death, while the communities they helped destroy will never be the same. A Puerto Rican family was wrongfully detained by ICE in Wisconsin after being overheard speaking Spanish. A family member explained to ICE in English that they were American citizens born in Puerto Rico, but ICE still transported them to a detention center. Now, this family, which included a toddler, was taken into custody while shopping. ICE agents refused to allow them to clarify their citizenship status until after they had already been transported to a detention center. When the family was finally able to present their identification documents, officials became apologetic. However, the so-called apology was meaningless, especially since the family was left stranded and forced to arrange and pay for their own transportation home from the detention facility. In another troubling incident, ICE agents showed up at a Puerto Rican restaurant in Philadelphia without a warrant. They told the owner that they wanted to, quote, check the restaurant, raising further concerns about unconstitutional enforcement tactics. Now, these incidents come just days after reports surfaced of members of the Navajo Nation being questioned, arrested, and detained by ICE despite being U.S. citizens. Now, know your rights. 1, you do not have to consent to searches without a warrant. An ICE detention warrant is not the same as a judicial search warrant. 2, you do not have to allow ICE entry unless they have a judicial warrant. 3, you have the right to a lawyer. And 4, you have a right to stay silent. So let's stay safe and let's stay vigilant. Here's your lunchtime update. Officials have confirmed that there are likely no survivors from a catastrophic mid-air collision that occurred late Wednesday near Washington, D.C. As of Thursday morning, 30 bodies have been recovered, but many victims remain unaccounted for. The American Airlines flight carrying 64 people was making its final approach to DCA after departing from Wichita, Kansas. Simultaneously, the Army Black Hawk helicopter with 3 soldiers on board was conducting a routine training exercise. Despite both aircrafts following standard procedures and the helicopter being equipped with night vision goggles, air traffic control had instructed the Black Hawk helicopter to maintain visual separation from the jet, a standard directive in a busy airspace. This area near the Potomac River sees roughly 100 government helicopter flights daily, including those from the Army, Marine Corps, Navy, FBI, and the Department of Homeland Security. The pilots involved in the crash were highly trained and highly experienced, and while the cause of the collision remains under investigation, the National Transportation Safety Board is leading the inquiry. The Army has placed the 12th Aviation Battalion on a 48-hour operational pause for review. Among the victims, the Steamfitters Union has confirmed that 4 of their members were aboard the American Airlines flight. In addition, a figure skating couple and several children and their parents were also among those lost. As investigations unfold, discussions about the root causes of the crash have sparked controversy. Some, including President Donald Trump and his supporters, have blamed diversity, equity, and inclusion, aka DEI initiatives, while others point to severe shortages in the air traffic controller industry. This crash is one of the deadliest commercial flight crashes in American history. Many prayers and thoughts to the victims and their families. This is a developing story, and I will provide further details as they emerge.